As kids, everyone enjoys playing on the jungle gym, right? Well, we thought we were just having fun, but really we were building muscles and flexibility and coordination and using and exercising our creativity at the same time to play, to make more fun. Well, just like the jungle gym builds strength and flexibility, mastering scales enhances your hand coordination and your musical flexibility. It's easy to get locked into routine or static ways of playing, sort of mindsets that lead to handsets that lead to boring sounding music. I'd like to show you how to break out of old routines by taking the same approach as you did on the jungle gym, by making exercises fun. Sound good? Let's get nerdy. I'm Andy Schneider, career musician turned guitar coach, producer, and author of over 100 books for my publishing company, Singing Music Books. I was a high school band nerd, then a devoted jazz guy, then a backing musician for great artists in every type of music. From Austin to Nashville to New York City, I've learned from my musical experiences and the great musicians that were there with me. I'm a self-taught guitarist, but I was lucky enough to get the right bits of education early on in my career. Pairing that with the many conversations I've shared with more experienced musicians put me on the path to success, a path that built my skills to become the experienced, confident musician audiences enjoy today. I created the Guitar Nerd podcast to give you simple steps to building and growing your musical knowledge, having greater abilities, and getting that amazing music that's inside of you out and into the world where we can all enjoy it. Whether you're a beginner or experienced guitar or bass player, if you want to make fantastic music, you're in the right place, my friend. Now let's get nerdy. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Guitar Nerd. My name is Andy Schneider. This is the place where we talk all things nerdy. Everything about guitars and bass guitars. We got technique talk here. We got theory talk. That was last week. We get down and dirty about the stuff that makes us nerds, that makes us guitar nerds. I've never met a guitarist that wasn't nerdy for guitar or bass. Whether you're new to playing or whether you have some experience, I hope you find something here that energizes your music this week, something that makes you look at what you do with fresh eyes. Last week, we talked about hammer-ons and pull-offs. It's a big technique show on what are hammer-ons and pull-offs, different ways of creating or crafting or shaping a phrase by not picking every note or plucking it with fingers, but by using a combination of hammering on the fretboard with the fret hand or pulling off the fretboard with the fret hand. So the note starts with the fretting hand. A lot of musicality and a lot of different sub-techniques inside of that. It was really fun to talk about with y'all. It's been fun to hear your response. This week, we're going to be exploring what I like to call the Scales Junglegym. Kind of a fresh way of making sure that you get unlocked from old habits by focusing on starting your scales with with every one of your fingers, really, about how to approach things in unusual and sometimes uncomfortable manners, but it's getting uncomfortable that makes music so comfortable, right? It's about the fact that you got real strong on the jungle gym, that now you can pick up those giant heavy things at the store, and the Scales Junglegym is the same thing. And I'm going to explain to you why. Scales, of course, are the foundation of music. I believe it was episode 1. We talked about scales become chords. And that's part of why you need to know music theory if you're going to be a great musician, because it's really important to know how chords go together. Well, scales are the foundation of music, and practicing them helps you understand the fretboard, really master it, develop your technique, which helps you create musical lines. And that's the whole purpose of all of that practice room stuff, right? Is to create better music. Scales are a great piece of your practicing regimen. But how many different ways do you know to play the same scale? Can you play it here and play it there on the neck? Can you play it starting on different strings? And more importantly, well, just as importantly, can you play it with a variety of different fingering patterns? Think of scales as your dexterity. Dexterity, the way that a sports figure, a professional baller would be looking at their art, at their craft, right? You're a basketball player. Are you really so predictable that you do every layup with your right hand? I hope not. Someday you're going to have to come in from the left side. Can you do it? Or are you just unprepared? You got to come in from the right side. If so, everybody's going to figure out your game. It's not going to end well. What if you don't have footwork? What if you can't stop, pivot, go somewhere else? Scale dexterity is just as important as left-right dexterity is to sports people. So I want to suggest a way of unlocking scales on your fretboard. Are scales part of your weekly routine? They should be, at least for a little bit. It's a great way to build your strength. It's a great way to prepare yourself for melodies and solos. And it's just good. It's good in all things. We bass players live and die by scales. It seems like that's kind of what our job is we're always playing scales or parts of them, right? Well, when you started learning scales, how did you learn? And everyone has a different answer to this, but think of the first scale you learned. Do you still play it the same way? Is it still in the same location on the fretboard? Because there are other ways to play that scale, even starting from the same note. Even if you first learned an open E. Well, there's only one low open E on a guitar or a bass guitar. But there are a couple of different ways that you might play that scale. If it was E major, you might play it across 3 strings. You might play it up and down just 1 string. My point is, they both sound different. Or I should say, every different way that there is to finger or fret that scale across the neck sounds different than the last one. And before I even get into how to unlock this sort of stuff and how to approach things and how to change up your practice routine, I'll tell you why you should be still listening. It's because of melodies. They lie differently under the fingers at different places on the neck. Notes don't sound the same. When it's the same note in the middle part of the neck, same note way down near the nut, they have a different timbre, right? That's one good reason that you want to be flexible, and scales will lead you to that. Good scale practice will lead you to that. And another thing is just in crafting the line, sometimes to aid the motion, you need to be able to, you remember last week we talked pull-offs and hammer-ons? You need to be able to adjust your location, adjust your fingers, so that it just kind of works out in a more musical fashion, the way that you would if you were speaking or singing to someone. You want those notes to fall under the fingers in a convenient to play manner and in a more musical manner. And when I get out, I'm big on trusty bass these days. I'll get out my trusty bass and play a few of these things for you. And you'll hear how the little melodies that I'm going to craft just sort of lie differently. They lie differently when I play a scale in one manner and another. So, first of all, I advise learning, of course, all 12 scales. Learn the scales you do without using open notes, without using open strings. Just for now, it's fine. We need to use those as well. But as an approach, especially as an approach to crafting solos, it's best to have all of your scale knowledge available without needing open strings. So, what I'm going to say applies to any scale or any mode, anywhere on the neck. Learn to start them with your first finger or your second finger or your fourth finger. Third finger is a trick. I'm sure there's a lot of people that can do it. I find my third finger, my ring finger, I don't know. It doesn't lie well. The rest of the scale, I should say, doesn't lie well when I start most scales with my third finger. But anyway, I like to start with first and second and fourth. When I start them with each finger, it enables me to have a different reach, either up the fretboard, with a big wide hand, or maybe just a nice convenient across the strings approach, or maybe a something else totally weird and totally different that also makes it possible for me to craft a totally unique and different melody. Let me grab my bass and I'll show you. Let's pick, I don't know, C major. I love using C major because everybody knows it. It's an easy thing to talk about because it doesn't have sharps or flats. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I'm going to show you 3 different ways that I practice this scale. And when I started doing this, it blew my playing wide open. No joke. It enabled me to be able to play pretty much anything at any time. I wasn't locked into patterns. Let's take a listen. The way that I first learned scales, I learned C major scale, 2-4, 1-2-4, 1-3-4, 2-4, 1-2-4, 1-3-4. Across 3 strings. And I would do that up and down and down and up for hours and hours and hours. And then I would play it in D major and E major. Great things to do. That kept me busy for years as I built up my speed to crazy heights. And especially when I became a guitar player, I found that that wasn't enough, that I needed more than this one position to play my C major scale. I wanted to be able to really reach. So I started practicing my scales with my first finger. So instead of 2 and 4 on my low string, instead of just 2 notes, I'm going to use 3. C, D, and E. Playing it with my first, my third, my fourth finger, so I'm really reaching. It's comfortable. And I am playing on the lowest string right now, in case you're wanting to repeat this at home. And the next string I did also same deal, F, G, A. And then just 2 notes on the last string. Here's the first way I played it. Second way. Not a lot of difference, right? Not a lot. Not that you've heard yet. It's coming. And then I thought, well, that's pretty good, but could I start with my pinky finger? And why would I want to do that? I don't know, just to challenge myself, I guess. Well, how would that work? Well, let's see. I would play the C with my pinky, and on the next string I would go 1, 3, 4. Okay, and then on the next string I would use 2 notes, G and A, and on the next string, B and C. So I went 1 note on the first string, then 3 notes, then 2 notes, then another 2 notes. Okay, so here's 3 different ways to play this scale now. I'll do them real fast. You'll hear very subtle differences. way I played that was starting with my first finger. And it's reaching up the neck. We're using higher frets with that sort of approach. More mellow notes, more bass-rich notes. And the other way, when I started with my fourth finger, reached across the neck until I was playing two of the notes on the highest string. Hear that tone come out? Well, maybe that's good. Maybe it's not good. Depends on the piece of music that I'm playing. But that's one very subtle difference between these two patterns. So when I would learn scales, I like to make it a little bit more challenging and musical by playing them combinations at a time. 3, maybe 4 notes. Here's the 4 note at a time technique. Do you see what I'm doing? Each note, each group of 4 advances 1 note up the scale. So just a way of making more out of something as simple as a scale. Well, trying that in the different positions led me to so really, why are these 3 different approaches to the same scale important? Because melodies lie better under one form, under one fretboard position than another. Just a few episodes ago, episode 8, we discussed modes. You remember modes? Scale flavors, they're all related to each other. And then we talked about hammer-ons and pull-offs and how my dog is snoring. Olive, that's not very professional. Hammer-ons and pull-offs make guitar lines more musical, and they make it more fluid. Well, if you're going to be hammering on, pulling off, and floating around a scale, it sure helps to be in the right position. Let me try to explain. I'm going to play this little phrase with a scale form, the one that I just showed you, starting with my first finger. So I'm going 1, 2, 4, and again 1, 2, 4, and on the third string, 1, 2. Notice sort of the flow of this line. Okay, now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to start with a scale form that starts on my fourth finger. The one that goes 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, and another 1, 2. Listen to how this melody is going to sound different. I'm going to try to play something about the same. Very different from the one that I first started playing, which was which had a more mellow approach. Okay, really subtle. But depending on your melody, one or the other is probably going to work out better for you. This really applies to riffing. Creating a riff, a repeated melody part, right? A lot of what we do when we're creating riffs is incorporating hammer-ons and pull-offs to get the emphasis right, to get that line to land well. So the position in which you learn a scale greatly determines what you're going to think of as you're writing a riff, or how capable you'll be at playing somebody else's riff. If you've got the flexibility, if you've got the dexterity, if you've got the strength, you'll be ready for everything. That's what I'm trying to do, is make sure that you're ready for anything. Great music is unpredictable, isn't it? I think it is. I think great music constantly surprises us, turns a page that we didn't expect was coming. And having the flexibility of scales under your fingers is just one more way to add musicality to your guitar approach. If I've piqued your interest about scales and the Scales Junglegym, and you're looking to dive deeper into a scales study, check out my book, Guitar Scales Infinity. It's on Seeing Music Books publishing brand. That's my publishing company. It's called Guitar Scales Infinity. Yeah, and it is sort of what it implies. It's about unlocking your approach, unlocking your creativity, so that you can turn guitar scales into anything. It's packed with exercises and insights to help you master scales in all forms, including modes. We talked a lot about modes a couple of episodes ago, and that is what it is about. This book, along with others from Seeing Music Books, cover these topics in great depth and can be a good resource for you on your musical learning journey. Bass guitar players, didn't forget about you. I've got Bass Guitar Scales Infinity as well. And yes, they both come in a left-handed version. Yep, left-handed Guitar Scales Infinity, left-handed Bass Guitar Scales Infinity. They're on sale at your bookstore or at seeingmusicbooks.com. Okay, you more advanced players, it's time to nerd out. Let's think of some ways that we can use the Scales Junglegym, that we can use our creativity to build our own strength, okay? Scales, everybody does them. Everybody loves or hates them, it seems like. Let's make sure you love them because there's a lot to love. They're going to power your music. No matter what style you're into, you're going to thank yourself for the time you invest in your own skills. How about taking those scales, I think I already mentioned here, playing them 3 or 4 notes at a time. So I had, that's a cool way to do it. It's nice to practice it up and down. So once you've found a little pattern that you like, maybe it's 1, 2, 3, and then back down to the second note, and then start on the third note, and then play 3 notes starting at the 4th note. Now let's try that using the Scales Junglegym. I was doing that on my comfortable old plain scales starting on my 2nd finger, but I'll do it starting on my 1st finger. It's a good stretch. And it does stretch my coordination and make sure that my fretting is rock solid all the way across the neck. So a fun game I like to play is by breaking up my scale into 3 or 4 note patterns, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6. Doing that with a minor scale. Doing that with all of my modes. But you can also play more games than that. Let's really get out there. How about skipping some notes? Yeah. In fact, instead of playing, let's skip that 4th note. So I would go 1, 2, 3, 5. Same thing there. Yeah. Okay, that was fun, and I applied some sort of loose rhythm to it. But let's really work it down with a metronome while we're doing this. Always a good idea in the rehearsal room. Please have a metronome and use it frequently. It'll show you where you're lacking. It's fun. It adds to your dexterity, and it's starting to sound like maybe an interesting figure might be happening in there. Something I could use for a song someday or a really creative bass line. I think you're already starting to see how improvisation or how riffing might come out of this sort of approach when you start getting really handy with your fingering. You also start playing around with it creatively. You start turning it over in your mind, and all of a sudden, a lick comes out or a riff that you want to hear a lot. Starting a scale on the fourth finger for me is one of the most challenging things there is to do. It just seems so backwards of how my mind likes to organize things. And yet, it enables me to see things differently. I see my fretboard differently. I see the roots of the chords differently. And that enables me to play much more interesting parts. For example, the version of the scale, it starts on the fourth finger. Four for the root. My fourth finger is playing the root, and then I go 1, 3, 4. And then I go 1, 2. 1, 3. And then 1, 2. So it's 4, 1, 3, 4. Then 1, 3, 1, 2. Well, I might that come up with a riff. I think, I'm going to start on the high note. That kind of had a cool flow to it, but I never would have thought of that if I'd started my scale on my second finger. It's okay. Or whatever it was. I just like how that lies under the finger and falls in my ear. It kind of lands with a plunk on the last note, and I just like the general tone of each note along the way. I don't like it in other positions. That's what I'm talking about. That sort of flexibility will aid your craft, will aid you crafting music. So learn those scales, starting with your first finger, starting with your second finger, starting with your fourth finger, guitar and bass players, all y'all. Today we explored the Scales Junglegym, focusing on scales starting with the first, second, or fourth fingers. Remember, scales are your musical vocabulary. Mastering them opens up the world of music, a world of possibilities. Thank you, y'all, for subscribing to this podcast. Thanks for following me on social media. Let me know your stories, what you're working on, what you're enjoying. It keeps me going, and music is best as a team sport. I think we're better together. Sharing little bits of our experience is what makes musicians strong. Next week on Guitar Nerd, we're going to be talking electricity. Yeah, zap! Electricity basics for guitar and bass. It's hard to play a guitar these days that doesn't have some electrical component to it, it seems. And if you're going to be playing through amplifiers, through pedals, it just helps to have a little bit of understanding. You don't need a PhD and you don't need a master's degree in electrical engineering to understand this stuff. It's pretty simple. Having a picture of the foundation of what is going on between the pickups and the speakers just makes it that much easier to visualize your tone tools that are there in front of you. You got great music inside of you, buddy. Let's get it out and into the world for everyone to hear. The world needs music, and you can do this. You're in the right place. We love getting nerdy around here, don't we? Today was an especially nerdy episode. A lot of subtlety, but that's what music often is. It's an application of little bits of subtlety. Experiment with starting scales with different fingers this week. See how it changes your playing. Until next time, have a great nerdy week. I'm Andy Schneider, and you've been listening to Guitar Nerd.